The words, when they came, were not delivered with the heat of anger, but with the cold, sterile precision of a bookkeeper closing a ledger. "We just can't keep feeding you for free, Mom." My daughter, my Nancy, said it. She said it while standing in the kitchen I had taught her to bake in, the sunlight from the window glinting off the new, expensive countertops they had bought with my money. Her husband, Tyler, stood beside her, nodding in solemn agreement, his arms crossed over his chest like a nightclub bouncer guarding a VIP section. I was no longer allowed to enter. Then, as if to punctuate the statement, she held up her phone. "I've canceled your Walmart delivery account. From now on, we'll handle the groceries. We'll just add what you need to our list." In that single brutal moment, the foundation of my life, already cracked and groaning under the weight of their year-long occupation, finally gave way. I was no longer a mother in her own home. I was a charity case, a dependent, a mouth that had become too costly to feed. They thought my grief over losing my husband had rendered me helpless. They mistook my quiet compliance for senility. They were about to learn that a woman with nothing left to lose is the most resourceful creature on earth. They canceled my groceries, but I was about to cancel their entire future. And it would all start with the quiet turning of a key in a lock they didn't even know existed. It all began, as these slow-motion tragedies so often do, with an act of love born from a place of profound loss. When my husband, Frank, passed away, the silence in our big house in Cincinnati became a physical entity. It was a constant, heavy companion that followed me from room to room, a suffocating blanket of grief. I was adrift in an ocean of loneliness, and the echoes of my life with him were a constant, painful reminder of everything I had lost. Nancy and Tyler, married for just over a year, were living in a cramped downtown apartment, perpetually complaining about the rent, their student loans, the general injustice of their starter life. My heart ached for them, and for the echoing quiet of my own home. My idea, born from a mother's heart that still yearned to nurture and to fix, seemed like the perfect solution for everyone. I would have company, the sound of life to fill the dreadful quiet. They would have a beautiful, spacious home, rent-free, a chance to get on their feet. I remember the day I proposed it, my voice full of a hope that now feels like a deep and profound naivete. "Move in with me," I'd said one Sunday over coffee. "There's so much space here. You could save money, get on your feet." And I wouldn't be so alone. Nancy's eyes had lit up, a flicker of something I mistook for daughterly affection, but now recognized as pure opportunism. "Oh, Mom," she'd cooed. We couldn't possibly impose. Tyler, with his smooth, practiced charm, had sealed the deal. "Margaret, you're a saint. We'll take such good care of you. You've done so much for us. Now it's our turn to look after you." I swallowed their promises like a starving woman. I believed them because I needed to. I needed the noise, the life, the feeling of being a mother again. I helped them move their boxes in, clearing out Frank's old office to make space for their things. I didn't realize I was not just making room for their furniture. I was beginning the slow, painful process of my own erasure. I was a willing participant in the dismantling of my own life, naively believing I was building a new one for us all. The colonization of my home began subtly, with 1,000 small cuts to my identity, each one disguised as an improvement. The first thing to go was Frank's recliner, the worn leather chair where he had read the paper every morning for 30 years. "It's just so bulky and dated, Mom," Nancy had said, her voice laced with a gentle pity that was more insulting than outright disdain. "We found a much more modern piece that will really open up the living room." The modern piece was a cold, angular sofa that was impossible to get comfortable on. I didn't say anything. I watched the delivery men haul away Frank's chair, a piece of my heart going with it. Next, it was the walls. The family photos that lined the hallway, generations of memories from my wedding day to Nancy's first steps, were taken down one by one. "We're going for a more minimalist aesthetic," Tyler explained, as he replaced a cherished photo of Frank and me with a generic, mass-produced print of a fern. My history was being curated out of existence, deemed too cluttered for their new streamlined life. My kitchen, once my undisputed domain, became a battleground. The recipes I had perfected over a lifetime, the dishes Nancy had begged for as a child, were now met with polite disgust. My meatloaf was too heavy, my fried chicken was too greasy. They embarked on a series of trendy, expensive diets, filling my refrigerator with strange green juices and foods I couldn't pronounce. The comforting aromas of my home were replaced by the smell of steamed kale and simmering resentment. I tried to push back, to hold my ground on the small things. "I like my curtains, Nancy," I'd say softly. "They were a gift from your grandmother." "I know, Mom, and they're lovely," she would reply, her tone making it clear they were anything but they just don't go with the new color palette. "We have to think about the overall look of the house." "The house, not my house. The house." The language was shifting, and with it the balance of power. Every suggestion I made was met with a patient, weary sigh. Every preference I expressed was treated as a stubborn refusal to get with the times. They were experts at making me feel like the difficult one, the one who was stuck in the past, the one who was preventing our new family from gelling. I was being gaslit in my own living room, made to feel unreasonable for wanting to see my own life reflected in the home I had spent my life creating. The injustice of it was a constant low-grade fever. I would retreat to my bedroom, the last bastion of my former life, and listen to the sounds of them rearranging my world without my consent. I told myself I was being too sensitive. I told myself this was the compromise required to have family around me, but the loneliness I had so desperately tried to escape was creeping back in, and this new version was far more insidious. It was the loneliness of being invisible, of being a ghost in the vibrant modern home my house was becoming. The assault on my emotional space was quickly followed by a strategic and devastating takeover of my financial independence. It was a masterclass in manipulation, performed with the loving concern of devoted children. They sat me down at the new glass dining table, the one that always had smudges on it, and presented a stack of my own bills with grave expressions. "Mom, we were just going through these, and we're worried," Tyler began, his voice a perfect symphony of sincerity and concern. "You have so much to keep track of, the mortgage, the utilities, your insurance. It's a lot for one person to handle." Nancy placed her hand on my arm, her touch cool and proprietary. "We just want to make life easier for you," she said. "What if we consolidated everything? We could open a joint account, and we can manage all the household payments from there. Your pension can be direct deposited, and you'll never have to worry about missing a due date again." My heart sank. Frank had set me up so carefully, ensuring I would be independent and secure for the rest of my days. My finances were my last vestige of my autonomy, the one part of my life they hadn't yet touched. "I'm perfectly capable of paying my own bills," I said, a defensive edge to my voice that I instantly regretted. "Oh, we know you are, Margaret," Tyler soothed, his tone placating. "This isn't about you not being capable. It's about us taking on some of the burden. It's what families do. We want to take care of you." They used my love for them, my desire for a harmonious family, as a lever to pry open my life. To refuse their help would be to accuse them of something nefarious. To admit that I didn't trust them, it would shatter the fragile peace. And so, worn down and wanting to believe in the best version of my daughter, I agreed. The next day at the bank, Tyler did all the talking. He charmed the teller with a story about helping his aging mother with her estate planning. I signed the forms, my hand unsteady, adding both their names to my checking and savings accounts. And just like that, they had the keys to the kingdom. For the first month, they were meticulous. The bills were paid on time. But then the bank statements started to tell a different story. There were charges from expensive downtown restaurants, online shopping sprees for clothes in Nancy's size, a weekend getaway to a spa in Chicago that I certainly wasn't invited on. The withdrawals were disguised as household expenses or family needs, but I wasn't a fool. I knew my money was funding their increasingly lavish lifestyle. I tried to confront them, my voice shaking as I held up a statement showing a withdrawal of several $1,000s for home improvements. It had paid for the giant wall-mounted television they now watched every night. "Tyler, what is this?" I asked. "We didn't discuss this." "It's an investment in the property, Mom," he said, not even looking away from the screen. "It increases the value for all of us." The audacity of it left me speechless. My savings, the money Frank and I had scrimped and saved, was being used to improve a house they were living in for free, and I was being told it was for my benefit. I was no longer a person. I was a resource. I was the silent, involuntary financier of a life from which I was being systematically excluded. I was paying for the very decor that was erasing me, funding the very lifestyle that was marginalizing me. The injustice of it all settled deep in my bones, a cold, heavy stone of resentment that I was forced to carry in silence. My world, which had once been filled with friends, hobbies, and community, had shrunk to the size of the chair in my bedroom. The isolation tactics that Nancy and Tyler had employed became more brazen, more cruel. They no longer bothered with flimsy excuses. They simply cut me off. The house phone, which I now realized they had set up to forward to Nancy's cell when they were out, rarely rang for me anymore. On the rare occasion a friend did manage to get through directly, Nancy would often hover nearby, making it impossible to have a private or honest conversation. My best friend Monica was the most persistent. She knew something was wrong. She started showing up at the house unannounced, trying to bypass the gatekeepers. The first time she did it, Tyler answered the door. I was in the kitchen and heard his smooth, practiced voice. "Monica, so good to see you. I'm so sorry Margaret is right in the middle of a nap. She's been so exhausted lately." I was wide awake, holding a cup of tea, my heart pounding in my chest. I wanted to run to the door and scream that I was a prisoner, but the shame held me in place. What would I even say? How could I explain that my own daughter was holding me captive? It sounded like the plot of a lurid television movie. Monica tried again a week later. This time Nancy answered. Her approach was different, more insidious. "Oh, Monica, hi," she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "Mom's just having a bit of a confused day. Her memory, you know. The doctor said it's best to keep her environment calm and not have too many visitors. It agitates her." I stood at the top of the stairs, listening in horror. She was painting me as a senile old woman, incompetent and fragile. It was a lie designed not only to keep Monica away, but also to plant a seed of doubt, to discredit me in case I ever did manage to cry for help. The lie was a masterpiece of cruelty. It simultaneously isolated me and destroyed my credibility in a single stroke. After that incident, Monica's visits stopped. I couldn't blame her. She was trying to respect what she believed were my medical needs, manipulated into compliance by my own child. The loneliness became a physical ache, a constant companion. I had invited my family in to fill the silence left by Frank, but they had replaced it with a different kind of silence, a cold, menacing quiet, filled with unspoken threats and the constant hum of their disregard for me. I was completely at their mercy, and they showed none. My days fell into a bleak, monotonous routine. I would stay in my room until I heard them leave for the day, then creep out to the kitchen to make myself some toast and tea. I would spend the day tidying up the house, washing their dirty dishes left in the sink, folding their laundry left in the dryer. I did it partly out of a lifetime of habit, and partly out of a desperate, pathetic need to feel useful, to somehow earn my keep in the home that was supposed to be mine. They treated me like an unpaid, invisible maid. They would walk past me without a word of greeting. They would discuss their plans for the weekend in front of me as if I wasn't there. I was no longer Margaret, their mother. I was a fixture, a piece of furniture that occasionally moved and breathed. The injustice was a slow-burning fire in my gut. I had given them everything, my home, my financial security, my love. In return, they had stripped me of my friends, my dignity, and my identity. I was trapped in a nightmare of my own creation, haunted by the ghost of the loving daughter I thought I had raised. The weeks that followed my secret call to Ms. Albright were a masterclass in covert operations. On the surface, nothing in the house changed. I continued to play the part of the frail, compliant old woman, shuffling through my days in silence, eating my meager meals without complaint. But beneath the surface, a quiet, legal storm was gathering, and I was at its center. My first secret mission was to gather more evidence. With Ms. Albright's guidance, I used the burner phone Monica had given me to take pictures of financial documents Nancy and Tyler carelessly left lying around, credit card statements with exorbitant charges, loan applications, letters from credit. Every piece of paper was another nail in the coffin they were unknowingly building for themselves. My trips to the knitting circle at the library became my clandestine meetings with Ms. Albright. I would take the bus across town, my heart pounding, a folder of new evidence tucked into my large purse. We would sit in a quiet corner of the law library, planning our next moves. The first step, Ms. Albright had instructed, is to secure your asset. With her help, I opened a new bank account at a different bank, under my name only. We then filed the paperwork to have my pension and Social Security checks redirected to this new, secure account. The final step was to cut off their access to my old account. As the sole original owner, I had the legal right to remove them. I signed the forms in Ms. Albright's office, my hands steady. The trap was set. Now we just had to wait for them to walk into it. The explosion happened on a Friday. Tyler came home from work in a fury. I heard him slam the front door and storm into the kitchen, where Nancy was. My card was just declined at the gas station, he roared, and the mortgage payment for the SUV bounced. What the hell is going on? I heard Nancy's panicked reply. I don't know, my card isn't working either. The joint account says insufficient funds. They argued for nearly an hour, their voices a symphony of rising panic and mutual accusation. They never once considered that I could be the cause of their problems. In their minds, I was powerless, irrelevant. They were so blinded by their own arrogance that they couldn't see the architect of their destruction, sitting quietly in the next room, listening with a grim sense of satisfaction. The final phase of the plan was the most audacious. We are not going to evict them, Albright had said, a predatory smile on her face. An eviction is messy and can be delayed. We are going to sell the house. We hired a real estate agent who was a master of discretion. He marketed the property as a pocket listing to a select group of pre-qualified buyers. His cover story was brilliant. He was an appraiser from the bank, sent to assess the property for a refinance application they had supposedly filed. They bought it hook, line, and sinker, even boasting to him about all the valuable improvements they had made. They were proudly giving a sales tour of the kingdom they were about to lose. The offer came from a young doctor and his family, a full cash offer, well over the asking price. The closing was scheduled in 2 weeks. I moved out in the dead of night, slipping away with a single suitcase while they slept. Oblivious, I left a note on the kitchen counter, on the very spot where Nancy had so casually informed me that she had canceled my grocery account. My note was simple. It read, "You thought you could starve me, but you only fed my resolve. The house is sold. You have 48 hours to vacate. Enjoy your dinner." The phone call came at 9:03 a.m. on a Saturday morning. I was sitting in my new temporary apartment, a cup of coffee in my hand, my heart a steady, calm drum. It was Tyler. His voice was not the angry roar of the previous weeks. It was a thin, ragged shriek of pure, unadulterated panic. "Mom, what did you do?" he screamed into the phone. "There's a moving truck in the driveway. A family is on the porch with a deed. They're saying they bought the house." I let the silence stretch for a moment, picturing the scene, the beautiful public implosion of their arrogance. "I sold the house, Tyler," I said, my voice as cool and clear as a winter morning. It was, after all, my house to sell. There was a sputtering, choking sound on the other end of the line. I could hear Nancy in the background, her voice rising in a hysterical wail. "You can't do that," Tyler yelled, his voice cracking with disbelief. "This is our home. We live here. We have rights." "No, dear," I said, my voice quiet, but laced with the unbreakable strength I had discovered within myself. "You lived there, in my house, as my ungrateful guest, and your extended stay has come to an end. The people on your porch are the new legal owners. They have a court-ordered notice for you to vacate the premises immediately. I suggest you comply, before they are forced to involve the sheriff. You can't just throw us out. We'll sue you," he blustered, his rage collapsing into impotent threats. "Actually, Tyler, you can't," I said, channeling Miss Albright's calm authority. "You were tenants at will. You had no lease. You have no legal claim to the property. You have only what you came with, which, as I recall, wasn't much. You planned this," he whispered, the dawning horror in his voice the sweetest music I had ever heard. "You planned this whole thing while you were sitting right here, eating our food." I almost laughed at the irony. "My food, Tyler," I corrected him gently, "paid for with my money. But you're right. I did plan it. You called me a freeloader, a burden. You canceled my grocery account. I decided to cancel your residency. Goodbye, Tyler." I hung up the phone. I did not feel a rush of triumphant joy. I felt a profound, Hollowing relief, like a fever had finally broken. The queen had not just reclaimed her castle, she had sold it to the highest bidder, and moved on to a new, more peaceful kingdom. The aftermath, as gleefully reported to me by Monica, was a masterwork of poetic justice. The new owners had been kind but firm. The police were eventually called to supervise a peaceful transition of tenancy. Tyler and Nancy were forced to frantically pack their designer clothes and minimalist furniture into a rented U-Haul, while the entire neighborhood watched from behind their curtain. Nancy, apparently, had a full-blown meltdown on the front lawn, screaming about my betrayal, while Tyler just stood there, shell-shocked and defeated. Their kingdom, built on a foundation of my stolen money and their boundless arrogance, had been publicly dismantled in a single morning. They were forced to move into a cheap extended-stay motel on the other side of town, a place with stained carpets and the lingering smell of despair. The luxury SUV was repossessed. Their credit was ruined. They had tried to erase me, and in the end, they were the ones who had been rendered homeless and insignificant. I sit on my new balcony now, a cup of coffee warming my hands, and I watch the sun rise over Cincinnati. The air is cool and clean, and the quiet is a comforting blanket, not a suffocating shroud. My life is small and beautiful, curated not by someone else's aesthetic, but by my own sense of peace. I don't think about Tyler and Nancy often. The anger has long since faded, replaced by a kind of weary, distant pity. They were so consumed by their own greed, so desperate for a life they felt they were owed, that they destroyed the one person who had ever truly loved them. It is a tragedy of their own making, and they will have to live with the consequences for the rest of their lives. A few months ago, I received a letter, forwarded from Monica. The handwriting was shaky, almost childlike. It was from Nancy. It was not an apology. It was a rambling, self-pitying account of her hardships. Tyler had left her. She was struggling to find work. Her life was a mess. It ended with a single, stunning sentence: "After everything, I think you owe it to me to help." I read the letter, and then I did something the old Margaret would never have done. I laughed. A real deep, genuine laugh. The sheer unmitigated gall of it was almost impressive. I took the letter, walked over to the paper shredder Monica had given me as a housewarming gift, and I fed it into the machine. I watched as her words, her entitlement, her complete lack of self-awareness, were turned into a meaningless confetti of paper. My help, my love, my resources, they were no longer hers to claim. I had found new places to invest my heart. With a significant portion of the money from the sale of the house, I established the Pantry Fund, a foundation that provides grants to local food banks and offers direct financial assistance to elderly individuals who are facing food insecurity due to family neglect or abuse. My daughter's greatest insult had become my greatest legacy. My story is not one of revenge. Not really. It is a story of reclamation. It is the story of a woman who was told she wasn't worth feeding, and remembered she owned the whole damn farm. It is a story about the quiet, unshakable power that comes from knowing your own worth, even when those closest to you have forgotten it. I am not a victim, I am a survivor, and as I watch the morning light spill across my garden, I am filled with a profound and lasting peace. They canceled my grocery account, but I was the one who ended up with a feast that will nourish my soul for the rest of my day.